I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to welcome our guest speaker today. I have been such an admirer of hers from afar for a long, long time, and I'm quite thrilled that she is with us. Ruth Messenger is the president of American Jewish World Service, the world's leading Jewish organization working to end poverty and to realize human rights in the developing world. She joined AJWS in 1998 to continue her lifelong pursuit of social justice, helping people around the world improve the quality of their lives and their communities. During Ruth's 20-year career in public service in New York City, she served for 12 years in the on the New York City Council and 8 as the Manhattan Borough President. She was the first woman to secure the Democratic Party's nomination for mayor in 1997. She's considered a national leader in the movement to end the genocide in Sudan. She's been called upon several times to advise President Obama about creating a sustainable path toward peace in that country. In recognition of her leadership, she served on the Obama administration's task force on global poverty and development, and currently sits on the State Department's Religion and Foreign Policy Working Group and Strategic Dialogue with Civil Society. She's been honored for her inspirational work, and let me tell you, she is an inspirational force by many national Jewish organizations, including the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, the Women's Funding Network, the Union for Reform Judaism, and American Jewish Committee. She has received 4 honorary degrees from 4 major American rabbinical seminaries, and in recognition of her work, Ruth has been named one of Forward's 50 most influential Jews of the year for 10 years. I could go on, but I would deprive myself and all of you of her wisdom, her spunk, her courage, and her leadership. Will you please join me in warmly welcome our newest best friend, Ruth Messenger.
Thank you for those excessive words. I don't need to tell most of you, because you are part of this extraordinary faith community, of my admiration and respect for Ed Bacon, who has been preaching the social justice gospel in every place that it's invited, and sometimes in places that it's not invited, for years and years. Thank you so much, Ed, for your work. He and I had a wonderful dinner here not so long ago, and discovered all kinds of people we know in common, issues we worked on together, and it was, frankly, for me, tremendously an affirming moment. Let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to first introduce you very briefly, to members of our staff, to Allison Lee, who is the Executive Director of American Jewish World Service here, to Jocelyn and Berger and Emma Nesser-Holm. Emma is trying very hard not to have her baby at All Saints. But, you know, who knows? And to Beth Kraft, who is a member of the American Jewish World Service Board. Unfortunately, to Bill Resnick, who is also a member of the American Jewish World Service Board and managed to wave at me because I hadn't seen him. Anyway, I'm delighted that all of you are here. What I want to do is talk with you about American Jewish World Service, but particularly about what you see up there and what you see around you, our new We Believe campaign, which is a campaign to stop violence against girls and women, a campaign to stop hate and violence against LGBT populations around the world, and particularly a campaign to end the scourge of child marriage. As I speak, actually, my staff is going to circulate petitions because we are looking to get maximum support right now for the passage of the International Violence Against Women Act in Congress, and we'd love your support. If you want to wait to hear more about the act, I will speak about it. But in any event, I'm going to try to speak to you for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to introduce you to one of the American Jewish World Service, one of our wonderful partners, to Claudia Samayoa from Guatemala, and let her tell you a little bit about her work there, her human rights work in Guatemala. And then Claudia and I will take questions and wrap up within the time that we've been allowed. Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life. While poverty persists, there is no true freedom. That's very much what American Jewish World Service believes, but those are words of Nelson Mandela. And I pay particular tribute and respect to Nelson Mandela. I was extraordinarily privileged because I was in government in New York City at just the right time to be part of the welcoming ceremony for him in New York City, which was the first American city that he came to when David Dinkins was mayor. And so I've been privileged to meet him, to have an experience that I think some of the rest of you have had, and that is to stand in his cell in Robben Island and to be aware of this man as a human rights prophet of our time, someone who believed with every fiber of his being that every single one of us deserves equal respect and treatment, and someone who acted on that belief at every moment in all time. And I must share one other note. A former staff member of mine sent me an interview yesterday, an interview on the day of Mandela's death with a man that American Jewish World Service was particularly privileged to support, a man named Zaki Ahmed, who is an HIV-positive person in South Africa who led the hunger strike that finally convinced the Mbeki government to make antiretroviral medicines available. And in this interview, which I wish you could all see, I'd sit down and show it if I had it here, Zaki talked about the power of Nelson Mandela for people throughout South Africa, for people in the marginalized communities, and then described this moment, and I wish I could do what Zaki did, which was to imitate Mandela's voice. But in the middle of the hunger strike, Zaki reported that Mandela called. Zaki's partner said, "Mandela is on the phone." Zaki obviously thought it was a joke, picked up the phone and said hello, and Mandela said, "Zaki, I'm coming to take your pulse," because he was very, very ill and came to visit him. And for me, it's a piece of the spirit of this amazing person. And I would like to think that we gather today with particular memory and respect for the difference that he made in the world and for the difference that he would have us all make in the world. So that is the spirit and the mission and the guiding purpose of American Jewish World Service. We are an organization motivated by Jewish values that works to realize human rights and end poverty, particularly for the marginalized people in the world. Was tremendously moved in your service this morning to hear about the number of messages to all of us from John, from the other pastors, to reach out, to go beyond ourselves. And we at American Jewish World Service try to do that and to go way beyond ourselves, acting on the tenets of our faith, and I think I can comfortably say here, our shared faith, to make a difference for people in the world. We work in 19 countries. I'll tell you in a minute what we do there, but one of the things that's special for us at American Jewish World Service is that we not only work globally with the people who are making a difference on the ground, but we work and we invite everyone in America to work in America with our Congress, to take those actions that are within the power of our government to take that would make a vast difference for hundreds of millions of people around the world. In the 19 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America where American Jewish World Service works, we partner with spectacular indigenous grassroots leaders, people committed to making change, and the strategic allies that help them advance their causes. You're going to meet one of them. But we work with 500 of them. Some of you have been visited, my members of my board, and Wendy, have some other people here probably have been with us and visited and met some of those people. And I just have to say to you what I think you know already, which is they are people who put their lives on the line every day in ways way beyond what most of us in this country do to make a difference for themselves, their families, their communities, their countries, and the world. We work in 3 very large thematic areas. We work on issues of natural resource rights, land rights. That's a piece of the work that Claudia does in Guatemala. We work to help build and rebuild civil society in situations of conflict. And I want to mention one of those because I believe it's an area in which I hope that All Saints can stay involved, and that is the current bizarre effort on the part of the government of the Dominican Republic to make stateless at least 250,000 Haitians who are Dominicans of Haitian ancestry, who for a variety of historical reasons that I couldn't possibly go into now, have never been given full citizenship in the Dominican Republic, which is their country. And now the Supreme Court of that country has determined that they can be evicted from their country at any time and sent back to Haiti. But they are people who never lived in Haiti and who don't speak Creole. And in the 21st century, the notion that any government would render new people stateless is just, I think, an outrage that suggests the problems that we all still have with nationalism and the need to move beyond it. The third area in which we work and the origins of this special We Believe campaign is the work of sexual health and reproductive rights, the importance of helping girls and women and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender populations around the world who are so often and so cruelly the victims of division, hatred, and oppression. So our We Believe campaign, the one we're asking you to particularly join with us in moving forward, is a national, that is in this country, American Jewish World Service advocacy campaign, which calls on our government to do 3 things that would promote human rights around the world. First, to stop violence against women and girls worldwide by passing this International Violence Against Women Act. You might wish to say to me, how could it not pass? But the fact is it hasn't passed Congress any time in the last 4 years, and that's the reason why there's a need for an energized and intense campaign to support those members of Congress, including Senator Boxer, who are its leading proponents. Second one is to ask our government to use its full force in all of its various diplomatic relations to stop hate crimes against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people. And I would offer you as just one example that over this past weekend, over the Thanksgiving weekend, the offices of one of our partner organizations in Haiti, an LGBT organization, were raided by men with machetes who threatened to kill the staff who were there. Fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt. But that's the kind of situation in which people who are working for social change find themselves in so many parts of the world. And the third thing we're asking our government to do is to support all of those efforts that would empower girls to end child marriage. So just a minute for some statistics. There are 10 million women in the world who are married under the age of 18 every year. And those are mostly forced marriages engaged in for a complex set of reasons, usually by families disrespecting the independence and agency of their daughters. There are 76 countries in the world where homosexuality is forbidden by law. And in 5 of them, it's punishable by death. And every year around the world, right now, 1 in 3 women globally has been the victim of rape or attempted rape in her lifetime. So some stories, very quickly, I promise you. In Congo, Jeanette is 23. She has 2 children. She lives in a country that the United Nations describes as the rape capital of the world. A year ago, Jeanette was captured by 6 soldiers who held her and 2 other women captive, raped them repeatedly, and abandoned them and left them for dead. Jeanette managed to pull herself literally, physically together enough to get back to the main road and to seek medical treatment. She expected that her husband would support her, but after learning of the rape, he abandoned her. And so she and her children were forced to flee to a camp for internally displaced persons, and she is now, through an organization that we fund called Ligue pour la Solidarité Congolaise, she is now receiving the psychological counseling and the medical services that she needs to rebuild her life. It is precisely that kind of story that the International Violence Against Women Act would allow our government to respond to, both to make funds available for organizations like La Ligue and to allocate AIDS dollars and AIDS messages and to put the full force of the US Department of State behind women like Jeanette, making it a top United States diplomatic priority to stop such violence. I want you to meet one more woman. Zinat is 17. She lives in India. She's a Muslim. She's been married and divorced 3 times. These are marriages that took place against her will, efforts by her family to create a partnership that would bring them some funds, which they do desperately need, with the expectation that the marriage would then would end in divorce. But in fact, for Zinat, in each of these 3 relationships, she suffered serious abuse. She had no skills to protect herself and her own body, and she had no educational or vocational skills. And so in Zinat's case, she came to the Shaheen Resource Center for Women, another partner of ours, where she has not only received counseling and vocational training, but where the staff at Shaheen has interceded with her family, as they have with many other families in their community, to explain what this does to women and what this does to people's daughters, and to start to turn the tide and create community organizations and community efforts that are fighting against child marriage, against violence against girls and women, against hate crimes. Because we have learned at American Jewish World Service, and I know all of you at All Saints would understand this, that you can't impose these changes from the top down. That you impose the changes by finding those people who see their own vision of justice in their own community, who know what needs to be changed in order, as Nelson Mandela would have said, for the full dignity and respect of each person to be totally allowed to flourish. And leaders on the ground who are making these efforts are the people who need our help and our partnership. They need us to find their organizations. They need us to let them dictate the work of their organizations. And they need us to work in this country to change law, policy, and practice so that as our country acts in the world, it will act in the world with a sensitivity to those marginalized populations who do not yet have anything like the measure of freedom, the measure of education, the measure of employment opportunity, but most fundamentally, the measure of justice that we each believe should be the lot of every single woman, man, and child in the world. I want to stop now because I want you to hear from Claudia. I want you to understand. I promised her I wouldn't pre-announce her talk by telling you which of the pieces of her work she was going to talk about. But I do want you to know that Claudia Samayoa is a human rights leader who has and does herself experience hate, threats, and attacks on her work and on her person for the work that she is committed to and continues to do in Guatemala. After Claudia speaks, she and I will answer questions.
figure out how to do this. I'm so short. So may peace be with you. I'm just very grateful to be here and to have been invited to the communion during the service. It is great to be in a community where justice is part of the Advent day. And it is just suitable, being a Catholic, that this is the day we are talking about women's rights, because it's the day of the divine conception of Virgin Mary. Regardless of how we interpret that, the fact that the Holy Spirit joined and announced the coming of the Lord to a woman actually addresses this issue. Is that the addressing of the issue that women were, are, and even unfortunately, even the churches eventually help to oppress women. So this day, that's a day of a great announcement. I'm so happy that Ruth has talked about this and really invite you. Because regardless of what you work on human rights, and I know you all are human rights activists and defenders because you all promote any cause that you sign in this church, and this church itself is really committed to human rights. We have to understand that being a human rights defender is being a Mandela. For me, Mandela was the human rights, the champion. There's so many human rights defenders all over the world that are champions like Mandela. And I actually today in the morning when I was kind of like reflecting on Virgin Mary, I thought that, yes, one of my colleagues that was member of the board of UDFEGUAN just explained, she decided to do the unthinkable, run as Attorney General in my country, Guatemala. And of course, we all gathered there, and she got to be the Attorney General. She has been for 3 years now. And as a true champion of human rights, as Mandela did, she has not compromised her values, her commitments, and I can still tell that she's a human rights defender. And well, she has been told that one of the 10 more powerful women of the world. She has done this marvelous work, including allowing us to judge the genocide perpetrator, Efraín Ríos Montt, and got a sentence, a conviction for genocide and crimes against humanity. But as Ruth has told you, to work on issues of justice, to try to address the violence and the root of violence, as Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi told us, to show through our nonviolent action the root of the injustice in many, many countries means that we will be attacked. In Guatemala, when we signed the peace accord in 1996, I believe you all know that we went through a very rough civil war when genocide was committed. We thought that intolerance was not going to happen again. At least we were going to go away of that bad custom that I don't like the messenger, then I kill him or her, and not have to hear about the right of whatever we are fighting out, housing, women's rights, children's rights, LGBTI rights. Unfortunately, in the year 2000, we found out that neither the military nor the oligarchy and very conservative sectors of our society have signed that peace accord. And they were attacking back then. So what we have done is we have run a service that, as all the movements of human rights actually was very much championed by LGBTI organizations and development organizations and unions organizations, decided that to defend human rights meant that if any one of us, regardless of the issues we were talking about, regardless if we were not agreeing with each other, we should be together, stand in solidarity to respond. And I was charged, me, myself, and I, to work on this service and to help people to address violence. And I have been doing so. Since then, eventually, the job became so big for me, myself, and I to work together with I am a researcher also, so I had to get my bread. So eventually form an NGO That's where we met American Jewish World Service. That was over 7 years after the service. So we were very established. And we have attended over 4,400 attacks against human rights defenders in Guatemala in the course of 13 years. 184 of them had been killed. And as Ruth told, we work with any human rights defenders. So part of my job is making sure that if a villager, a human rights defender that is not well known is attacked, that made it very expensive to the attackers. And we will shed light. We will help the struggles to be known. So this human rights defender, that's not the sexy one, not the one that goes in the newspaper, actually gets the light of this wonderful job they're doing. As I say, the work of human rights defenders is joyful. It is dark sometimes, but there's so much hope in what they do. So just to tell you a little story, and with this I will finish. One of the groups that are most attacked in Guatemala are indigenous people, asking for indigenous rights and the right of land. We, in our society, 80% of the land is owned by 0.5% of the population, but 65% of the population work on the land. And this is why we went to war. And it hasn't changed, it has gotten worse. And it actually has been threatened because of these mining companies that just happen, can find the resources on top of the little land indigenous community do own. So we have this land grabbing process happening together with the mining companies. So what happens when a community starts saying, hey, I'm an indigenous people, I need for you to respect my right of consultations, I need for this company to go into the environment assessment, impact assessment, and really explain us what is happening, they start receiving threats. That's how I knew the community of San Rafael Las Flores. They organized in Santa Rosa, Guatemala. They are Xincas, they are not Mayans. And that had organized to ask for the right of consultation. And I knew them because the company, that is a Canadian company, opened a lawsuit against the priests and the leaders because they were talking about the right of consultation and the impact assessment. And the fact that for them, the little land they have was the sustainability. They are coffee growers. So that's how I managed to look at them. I attended, I denounced a complaint, I put a plaintiff under the prosecutor office. We taught them how to protect themselves. So suddenly they learn about, we invited them to a seminary about active nonviolence in Pasadena, where Jews, Catholics, and Muslims are resisting the violence that is little known about the struggle in Palestine. And these boys and girls said, oh, there's something we can do. And they started this resistance process, standing in front of the company's doors, trying to block the entrance of machinery and reminding people that they didn't have the permit to go on. They opened lawsuits. They did everything we are taught to do in nonviolent action. And they were threatened. Some of them got killed. Eventually, the government created a state of siege and militarized the area and tried to assimilate the leadership, including the priest and the bishop of the diocese, that they were actually narco-traffickers. So it got very bad. And we all work in this, and we have gotten a lot of support all over. But the important thing is that the human rights defenders, we help them for not to go back. I remember very clearly a catechist that told, I don't know how much we can convince people to continue nonviolently. If everything we do, the reaction is violence, but we will do so. Thankfully, they have resisted. Everybody was freed of their attacks. And I had just this wonderful news that being this day, the day it is, I want to share with you. The Constitutional Court declared that the consultation they had is binding and that the Canadian company has to leave town. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We have microphones So please just raise your hand and we'll get the microphones to you. We need for you to use a microphone because we're streaming. I do want, while the microphones are coming to you, to acknowledge the presence of Marion Rod Edelman, who is our 11:15 preacher. It's amazing. It's amazing that on this day we have two spiritual siblings of Nelson Mandela here as our speakers, Ruth and Marion. It's just amazing. So first question back there.
I want to thank you folks so much for coming. What the American Jewish World Service is doing is very close to my heart. And I'm going to suggest that everyone leaves here today with an action that you will take to support women in the world. One, I'm going to go home and go on your website and make a gift of $50.
Thank you.
And for another reason, I'm going to go home and go to the Children's Defense Fund because of what I'm going to hear in the next hour and make a gift also. And then there's a local movement that Lorna Miller and Dr. Faseha, Ethiopian immigrant pediatrician, we have a local movement that's moving along, we think, called Half the Sky storytelling groups that are supporting the idea of getting behind the defending women throughout the world and defending children throughout the world who are equally oppressed as women by not feeding them enough, not giving them education, and not providing them the environment that they need. So Cheryl Boudin and Nicholas Kristof have written a book you must read, Half the Sky, and if you're interested in being part of this movement for helping women, we can start a little storytelling group reading the book in your home and get behind these three projects, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question right here. Please.
And we're circulating the petition, and I hope you will sign it or go on our website and sign it and then send it to other people.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, it's true, women are oppressed, and in certain areas I support the education of girls, like in Pakistan, and to help them take care of themselves, empower them. That's what works. However, drone attacks are undermining our efforts. We're investing tons and tons in drones that are turning these girls into suicide bombers, for God's sakes. This is not where we should be investing. Please help to stop this madness. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I'm just going to take a minute as you're going to the next questioner to say that I think there is something planned in who you have as speakers, but Marion Wright Edelman is someone that I have been learning from my whole life, and the work that she does and continues to do is just extraordinary, and it's sort of nice for me now that she's working mostly domestically and I'm working mostly globally, and that's particularly good that we meet at All Saints.
Another question. Please raise your hand. Okay. Oh, thank you, Alistair.
I understand that in Guatemala, about 50% of the children are hungry, underfed, undernourished. Is this related to the land tenure situation? And the second point I'd like to ask you, I understand in Guatemala they have a femicide law. Could you say something about that? And were you involved in the development of that femicide law to protect women? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's related to land tenure. As I told you, we have this very big concentration of land, but because land was given both to Spanish people and to Germans together with the communities, until 2008, more or less communities could work in a slave condition in these fincas and could raise their own food. But when they were displaced, and this is happening more to address another issue that is ethanol, biocombustibles. So you need big parts of land for African palm, for sugar plantation that you can then convert in ethanol. That is good to avoid using oil. But what is happening, as I know you know, is that we are losing land to sustain our food. So during the last 8 years, we went from 4 of every 10 children that were malnourished to 1 of every 2 children that are malnourished, and 5 of every 10 children that are malnourished, they are chronically malnourished. We also have a very big problem now for elderly people and women regarding malnourishment. So it's a very grave situation. That is not being addressed where should it be. That's the land issue. In regards of femicide law, yes, I can tell you the story of how this works. This is one of the issues where we have organized all together, regardless of our ideological point of view. Proportionally, we have the highest number of women being killed by being women in the world. And I have to say, in this organizing, there has been an incredible work by people from the United States, by senators and congresswomen and men that have put a lot of pressure into Guatemala. That's, I think, the important thing that's written in law. It has created some change, especially we got from 0% of investigation and cases on women killings, and right now we are on 14 of every 100 of these killings are being investigated, and people are being trialed and convicted. But also, as a result, women human rights defenders are much more attacked now. And another phenomena is starting to appear, and it's rapes. Rapes is a big phenomena. Now, not only because women are denouncing more, we are talking about 86,000 women raped that go to the judiciary system. And as you know, we are societies that are very conservative, so I wouldn't go and denounce this because I will be considered a whore, I will lose my husband, and I will be blamed for it. And so now we are also dealing with the fact that we don't have much children that get married, forced married, but we do have, this year alone, 2,000 children between 12 and 14 years old that are pregnant and that have become pregnant. So it's another way of the same phenomena. So, yeah.
And just what Claudia said about the femicide issue being investigated by members of Congress, that is precisely what the IVAWA, the International Violence Against Women Act, would do, would institutionalize the good efforts that our government has made in the last 4 or 5 years to deal with these issues and strengthen our capacity to address them in all of our negotiations with any one of these countries.
You want to go ahead and wrap it up?
Yeah, there's one question and then I'll wrap it up.
Yes, having a basic faith in humanity, I imagine you have a lot of men who are on your side.
Yes. We do. We do. We have many members, men on our side, on our staff, on our board. You met one of them, but also worldwide. Many of these groups engage men and boys. My current favorite is a group called Fortress of Hope Africa in Kenya, in which the women, the girls, got together to protest violence against girls, sexual violence in the community. But they've created hip-hop songs that are speak to boys as well, and that have become hugely musically popular in the country of Kenya. So the message is out all over. So thank you. I did want to wrap up, and I did want to say what I think I sense even from your questions, that all of us are committed to moving women, girls, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender populations around the world from discrimination to dignity. As the first questioner said, this takes action. So we asked you to sign the petition, but we ask you to circulate this information, to take literature, to check out our website, and to use every means you have for talking to people, not only, as I know you already do, about what's happening locally, but what's happening globally. Nelson Mandela said, "To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." There's a Jewish teaching that says, you're not required to complete the task, but you can't refuse to participate. My personal favorite Catholic was Archbishop Oscar Romero, and in the same spirit, he wrote once, This is what we are about. We plant seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something, and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for God's grace to enter and to do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future, not our own. Amen.
Thank you very, very much, Ruth and staff. And we'll see you in church with Mary and Rod Edelman in just a few minutes.